The Eagles didn't beat the Bucs. The Bucs beat the Bucs. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credential member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you 5 days a week along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Doing this post-game reaction episode a little differently since I wasn't able to go live Sunday night, and for that, I apologize. For those of you watching on YouTube, you might have already seen it. For those of you listening, you might notice that I sound a little different. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I had part of one of my front teeth broken off. Let's just say unsupervised children in a very crowded area with hockey sticks running around can lead to bad things. I'll just leave it at that, but hopefully I'll get that fixed sooner than later. But yeah, just something that I'm going to have to deal with. And again, I apologize for not being able to go live Sunday night, but we're not doing the biggest moments. We're not giving out game balls. You guys remember we don't hand out game balls for losses. I'm going to start this one off with some positivity. I know it's hard to be positive after a loss, especially a loss to a team like the Eagles, who Bucs fans just absolutely love to hate. But there are some positive takeaways. And here's where we're going to start. The Buccaneers are a better team than the Eagles. Yes, I said it. Yes, I mean it. The Buccaneers came into this game still missing the right side of their offensive line, missing their Hall of Fame wide receiver, missing one of their biggest contributors on the defense, and spotting the Eagles 14 points to start the game. And they still almost pulled it off. We are talking about one play here or there that changes how this game finishes. And I'm going to talk more about the play that we all wish the Bucs could have back in a little bit. But the Eagles gave it everything that they had. And what did it result in? A 6-point win and negative yards in the second half. Yes, including that run back for a safety at the end of regulation. The Eagles had negative 1 yard on offense the entire second half. That was against a defense that lost Jamel Dean, Benjamin Morrison, Hassan Reddick, and Greg Gaines. Jalen Hurts in the second half, 0 for 8 and was sacked twice. Before the final possession to end the game, the Eagles had 7 drives, 5 3-and-outs, 1 drive that lasted 5 plays, and then a punt, 1 touchdown after a bogus Bucky Irving fumble. They did absolutely nothing. Only 3 of those 7 possessions, again, not counting the final one, had positive yards. The Bucs defense absolutely shut them down. And you can say it, but James, they let off the gas and they were trying to run clock. Okay. The Bucs started coming back. And when the Eagles needed to string plays together to protect their lead, they couldn't do it. They couldn't ramp it back up again, much like what I said about the Bucs defense last week against the Jets in that fourth quarter. The Bucs had 2 defining plays at the end of this game that cost them. Forget about the way that it started. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But there were 2 key plays. The first was Bucky's fumble that wasn't really a fumble. His shin was down before the ball came out, and even after review, the refs screwed it up. Just like Ibuka clearly made the sideline catch last week against the Jets, Bucky was clearly down. And I saw that on my little phone screen, not my huge TV that I have, over my shoulder here in my office. That was the only time The Bucs defense allowed points in the entire second half, and it proved to be the difference. The second play that decided the outcome was Baker's interception. He's gotten away with some bad throws this season, but this one might be in the top 3 of the worst passes that he has thrown since arriving in Tampa. I know Baker is going to make mistakes. You have to live with him. That's the kind of player he is. But Baker also has to be aware of the situation. You want Baker doing the stuff that won them games in the first 3 weeks, taking off and running, trying to thread the needle like he did on Ibuka's 77-yard touchdown. That's the dude the Bucs fans absolutely love cheering for. That's the guy that puts the team on his back and leads them to victory. But he tried way too hard to make way too much happen on that play. It was 31-23, just under 8 minutes left. That's an absolute eternity for this Buccaneers team. All you needed were points. It didn't matter if it was a touchdown or a field goal. You just had to come away with points. And when you have 1st and 10 from the 11-yard line, you are guaranteed 3 points. It looked like he was going to take off and run when the pressure started to get there. And instead, he stopped and tried to force a pass to Godwin, flat-footed and directly into 2 Eagles defenders. There was absolutely no chance that ball was getting through to Chris Godwin. None. 0. You have to live to play another down. You either commit to the run and gain a couple yards, or you throw it out of the back of the end zone. Even taking a sack in that situation would have been the smarter play, because then you still have 2 more shots inside the 15-yard line before you trot Chase McLaughlin out there to make it a 5-point game. And with the way the defense had played the second half, there was no way the Eagles were running 7+ minutes off that clock to ice the game. No shot. You are going to get the ball back for a 4th week in a row to orchestrate a game-winning drive in the closing minutes. That decision is the difference between a game in Philadelphia and a game in Tampa in the month of January. Truly, it is. I know Baker wants that one back in a bad way, and you don't want to rip him too much because it's plays like that that he does, make on a fairly regular basis. But he's got to harness it in a little. If it's 4th down with under a minute to go, let her rip. You don't have any other choice. But in that situation, at that moment of the game, that's what ends up costing you. Yeah, and I know one play does not win or lose a game. There were a lot of moments that led to that interception where things could have been different for the Bucs. But you also expect this Buccaneers team to rise to the occasion because we've seen them do it so many times. They have found a way to dig themselves out of a hole, dig deep, and then scratch and claw their way to a win. You cannot afford careless turnovers against a team like the Eagles in those moments and expect to win the game. You just can't. There are things in Tampa that have to be fixed in a hurry. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, it's easy, and honestly, the best way to follow along with football. It really is a great and fun way to stay completely locked in even when your team isn't playing. You can make every single game mean something and be even more excited to take in the action. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Two key things in Tampa have to be corrected within the next couple of days if this team is going to compete in January. Now, I know that it can't all be fixed in just a few days, but we at least need to see huge strides being made in the right direction. The first one is the slow starts. Baker addressed it with the media after the game. Levante had addressed it with the team in the locker room, and they're 100% right. This team is way too freaking talented for this to be happening. And it's not just the offense. It's also the defense, who, to their credit, played some great football on Sunday against the Eagles. But let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Last year, it seemed like they scored on the opening drive from about week 4 through the rest of the year. Now, they didn't, but it felt that way. They were starting off hot every single game. Then the defense, shout out to Greg Allman, they allowed 4 touchdowns and 2 field goals in opening drives last season. So 6 out of 17 games, they allowed an opening score or an opening drive score. This year, it's been 3 touchdowns and a field goal in 4 games. So you've already accounted for 75% of the touchdowns you allowed last year and 50% of last year's field goals in 1 month. That has to stop. It absolutely cannot continue that way. The Bucs are starting off every single game from behind and having to fight their way back. And up until this week, they'd succeeded in doing that. But you cannot keep asking them to do it because, like Sunday, they're not always going to be able to overcome that deficit. On Sunday, they spotted Philly 14 points. It was 14-0 in the blink of an eye. Offensively, the Bucs have scored on an opening drive twice. So right out of the gate, you're allowing twice as many opening drive scores than you're getting. They have 1 touchdown and 1 field goal. Last year, they had 8 touchdowns and 3 field goals on opening drives. Again, shout out Greg Allman. I understand the offense has not been its full true self yet this season. But guess what? It's not going to be at all. Malk is out for the year. So the offensive line will never be full strength the rest of the 2025 season. Even into the playoffs, they will never be at full strength. Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan were both out. Then Godwin comes back, and now Mike is out. Kieft is out for the year. Regardless of all of that, the Bucs are still super talented on offense and should not be stalling the way that they have been to open games. It's as if the Bucs have to play an entire half of football before they get a feel for the opponent and start becoming capable of putting together scoring drives. I don't know if it's a coaching problem. I don't know if maybe Grizz just isn't quite there yet as a play caller. We've seen strides there, but maybe he's not all the way developed, or if it's simply an execution problem. No matter what the reason is, it's Grizz and Baker's job to figure out how to get things straightened out. They have got to figure out where things are going wrong and how to get it corrected. The protection is what it is. The weapons that are out there are what you have to work with. You need to find a much better way to script out the opening drive or the opening 2 drives to ensure that you're coming away with points and not putting more pressure on your defense. In turn, the defense has to figure out how to go out there and get stops and not allow opening drive scores so that they're not putting as much pressure on the offense to come from behind. We have yet to see the 2025 Buccaneers put together a complete game. It hasn't happened. Has not happened. If they played the entire game Sunday the way that they played that second half, they beat the Eagles running away. Instead, they shoot themselves in the foot over and over and over and over in the first half before trying to make a miraculous comeback. The other thing that needs to be fixed is special teams. Because, oh my goodness, has that been a train wreck this season? It was nice to see that Illinois legend Chase McLaughlin is all the way back. But as I said after week 2, we cannot have a good kicker and a good punter at the same time. Now, I also don't understand what this epidemic is in the NFL, where special teams is just a complete and utter disaster across the league. But the Bucs have had 2 punts and a field goal attempt blocked this year, and 2 of those have been returned for touchdowns. And I know there are a lot of people calling for Riley Dixon's head. After the game on Sunday, they're still calling for it on Monday. But let me say this. That blocked punt on the opening drive that led to the Eagles going up 7-0, that wasn't Riley Dixon's fault. It wasn't. Yes, he has an uncomfortably long windup that makes him susceptible to blocks. But there is not a punter on the planet that could have gotten that particular kick off against that rush that the Eagles brought. The dude that blocked it came right up the middle, untouched, to block it. That's a protection problem. That falls on coaching. I don't care which players are out. I don't care which players are hurt. I don't care what players you have available. There is absolutely no reason that Payne Durham is the one lining up next to the long snapper on a punt formation. He's not that good of a blocker, and it shows. He's the 3rd best blocking tight end on this team. Why is he lined up in the middle of the formation? Someone needs to explain that to me, because that is absolutely asinine. If they don't get this problem figured out, and quickly, it's going to cost them more games. It may cost them a chance to compete for a Super Bowl, and it's going to cost Thomas McGahee his job. You cannot allow this to keep happening. And the worst part is, this stupidity and this nonsense is overshadowing what a good job they've done in the return game. Cam Johnson is 5th in the NFL in punt returns, averaging just under 16 yards a return. He's been outstanding and has provided a big spark when the team has needed it. But when the flip side is that the Bucs are on pace to have 13 kicks blocked this year and 8 of them returned for touchdowns, that's insanity. McGahee isn't going to survive past the bye week if this kind of stuff continues. The Bucs do not have an easy game coming up this week. And we'll talk more about the injuries on tomorrow's episode, waiting to hear from Todd Bowles to get more information on those. But you are about to take the 2nd longest road trip in the NFL. And if you're going to allow Seattle to block a punt or block a field goal attempt, you're going to cost yourself a must-win game on the road. It is now time for a soapbox moment. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all turn to some funny places for advice. Your barista, your barber, maybe even a random stranger in the bathroom. But not everyone is the right one when it comes to real support. That's why BetterHelp is here. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 10 years of experience, BetterHelp helps you find your right match, someone clinically trained and credentialed to guide you through life's challenges. What's great is how flexible things are. You can join sessions online from home or on the go, which makes therapy fit into your busy schedule. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Hey, Locked On Bucs fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas that you already needed in the first place. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people like me are getting paid just to make their daily commutes or maybe hockey road trips, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or redeem for an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Wrapping things up here on a Monday reaction episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And as I mentioned, I will talk more about the injury situation on the next episode after we've heard from Todd Bowles. We have a better idea of what's going on. But losing Jamel Dean and Benjamin Morrison in the same game, that's not ideal at all. Dean was playing some of the best ball he has ever played. Morrison came in relief and did a phenomenal job. So it's really concerning that both of those guys could potentially be out this week against Seattle when Jackson Smith-Njigba is lighting the world on fire. But it's time for a good old-fashioned soapbox moment. I am not sitting here on this show telling you that it was the officials' fault that the Bucs lost this game. I want to make that very, very clear. It was not the officials' fault that the Bucs lost this game. I told you the two plays that ultimately cost them, and the Bucky fumble was a little bit on the officials, but the officials had nothing to do with Baker's interception. However, this is a consistent and obvious problem that only seems to be getting worse by the year. It's the egregious and obvious lack of accountability when officiating teams are missing clear calls. I tweeted out during the game, and you guys know I didn't get to see the entire thing live because I was driving. I did get to see quite a bit in the second half because my son's game was delayed, but I took an opportunity to tweet out that I wondered how many times the Eagles were going to get away with pass interference in this game. There were at least 7 different occasions that I saw when pass interference or defensive holding could have been called against either Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean. Both players were praised for pass breakups where they clearly got to the receiver early and made contact before the ball arrived. Both guys were again clearly caught pulling the jerseys of Buccaneers receivers to slow them down and prevent them from running their routes. There was a sack of Baker Mayfield where Ajomo, however you pronounce his name, led with his helmet, hit Baker in the helmet, and there was no call. So instead of a 15-yard penalty moving the ball to the Philadelphia 25 with under 2 minutes left, it was 3rd and 21 from the Philadelphia 49. Then you have the tush push, which the Eagles didn't actually run in this game. They ran some, to their credit, very, very clever tush-push fakes from that formation that wound up in the end zone. One to Saquon, one to Goddard. But it's not a football play. It's a gimmick, and it's a gimmick that has gotten out of control. Never mind my stance that I've said on this show a couple of times, that the play should be illegal because if a defender pushes another defender through the line, it's a penalty. But you allow 3, not 1, 3 offensive players to push one guy, and it's totally fine. That's wrong. That is wrong on every level possible. But it's the inconsistency with which it's officiated that is agonizingly frustrating. They let the play go way too long, as if forward progress being stopped is not a thing when that play is being run. And then you have more than one example this year of the entire offensive line moving before the snap, but there's no flag for a false start. I am fully aware that that majority of NFL fans seem to think that the Chiefs get all the calls and get bailed out and all of that, but they don't. Not at the level that the Eagles did on Sunday or that they have on a pretty consistent basis over the course of their 20 wins in 21 game stretch going back to last year. And again, I cannot stress enough, I am not blaming the officials for the Bucs losing. The Bucs did enough damage to themselves. But this is now back-to-back weeks where Tampa has been completely screwed on replay reviews. There were defensive holds and pass interferences that I could see, again, on my little phone screen, not my giant TV that I have sitting over my computer monitor. If I can see it on this little screen, the officials should have seen it 10 feet in front of their face. So my question is, where's the accountability? Where is the person or the committee responsible for cleaning up bad officiating in this game? The MLB is finally getting things right by implementing robot umpires. Not full-time, but they're going to be there. The NFL has now implemented these virtual measurements, but what about the rest? Who is pulling these officials into an office, into a film room, and running back the tape and pointing out missed or blown calls and asking them, why did this happen? Why wasn't this called? Why was it called here but not called here? I do not envy the jobs the officials have. I don't. It is a thankless job, and you have jerks like me sitting behind a camera and a microphone bashing them. But come on. For them to get some of the most difficult calls possible correct in real time and then miss blatant violations or blatant replay reviews, staring them right in the face, it's hurting the game. It is actively hurting the product that the NFL puts out each and every week. And it's affecting these players and these teams. Do better, Zebras. You have to do better. And you have to stop favoring certain teams because of reputation or social status or whatever. You call it even or tell the NFL that they need to replace you. Because there are clear and obvious teams that get a little more leeway. They get away with a little more, hand fighting, jersey pulling, false starts. And it's not just the Eagles. It's not. How many times did we see, the tackles on the Atlanta offensive line move before the snap? I think the count was like 8 or 9 times that they jumped early. And it was never called. Do better. Or don't do the job at all. That's going to do it for this episode. We will be back tomorrow to react to all of these injuries and figure out what the Bucs are going to do defensively if some of these guys are going to remain out for an extended period of time. In the meantime, though, check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Follow on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs at both of those places. Follow on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, it's real easy. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.